Good evening and welcome to Kunsang Payo Chuling. We're always glad to have you join us. And tonight we have a teaching by Jetsunma Ahkon Lhamo. The teaching is entitled Realize Your Natural State. Autocorrect seemed to think it was statue, but it's not. It's Realize Your Natural State. And that's by Jetsunma, and it was given in 1990. That was my mistake. I said 89. Anyway, we will start now and hope you enjoy it.
The subject that I had planned to speak about this morning is the difference between the full, and I should say even the partial realization, the natural state, which according to the Buddha's teaching is considered to be emptiness and luminosity. And according to the Buddha's teaching, this emptiness and luminosity are indistinguishable from one another, that they occur simultaneously, that they are inseparable. And yet, when we as students try to understand that, the only way that we can really understand that is through understanding one idea at a time. We can try to understand the idea of emptiness, and then we can try to understand the idea of luminosity. And it's very difficult for us to then take them, and what we try to do is sort of mentally try to paste them together, and paste them together in such a way that they can't be peeled apart. Now, the reason why that happens is because in order to actually be able to move into an actual experience or our perception of that natural primordial state, one has to have actually moved somewhat forward in one's realization. And specifically, according to the teachings, one must move into what is called the first bhumi, or the first level of realization that a bodhisattva has. That doesn't automatically happen, unfortunately, the moment one takes the bodhisattva vow. One actually has to practice, and one has to apply one's practice. And the practice has to be a consistent and determined effort. And initially, one begins to practice through contemplation, through an intellectual process of kind of distillation, where one goes over the points that one is taught, and one arrives at certain conclusions as to what one should reject and what one should keep. And from that, one begins to have certain ideas. Then later on, as one continues in one's practice, and specifically in the case of the Vajrayana that is taught here, when one begins to practice generation and completion stage practice, then slowly, after lots of contemplation, after lots of that generation and completion stage practice, after lots of intellectual input about this state of emptiness and this emptiness and luminosity, then one begins to have an experience, and it's a direct view. This experience, however, really is only had after the obstacles that arise within the mind are really taken care of, after they are truly pacified. One cannot actually have the experience of emptiness and luminosity unless these defilements, we call them, are pacified. Not so different, actually, from thinking that one would like to look at a diamond, but what one has is a diamond in the rough. And a diamond in the rough, of course, isn't fully mined. It isn't cut and faceted in such a way that you can really see its fire. You really can't see the gem while it's in its natural state. If you've ever seen an uncut diamond, it looks like a pebble. And you have to be really educated to know there's anything in there at all. And when the diamond is found in the ground, of course, it's enmeshed in dirt and rocks and different things like that. So the diamond, although there and fully what it's ever going to be, is not available to us and not visible to us. And it's the same way with the realization of the natural state, the realization of this emptiness and luminosity, that one has to chip it out of the ground, and in this case the ground, the dirt and the rocks might be considered the delusion that we swim in as we engage in preoccupation with relative view, and specifically as we engage in the fixation on subjective, objective perception. We have to actually take the diamond out of that. We have to remove it from that environment. And that happens, of course, through the rarefied condition of meditation and practice and contemplation. And then when we take it out of the ground, we have to cut it in such a way that one can actually see what the diamond is and see its qualities. And hopefully it will be cut by the most excellent cutter, the one that knows how to cut the diamond. And the only one that knows how to cut the diamond is the one who knows what the diamond is and who actually knows the diamond. And so we can use that as an analogy to understand that, first of all, one must remove one's perception from the gross defilements, and one must pacify all of the gross defilements, the heaviest defilements, and that's like taking the diamond out of the dirt and rocks. And then one must purify or pacify the subtle defilements, and that's like cutting the diamond so that it can be fully seen and fully revealed in its intrinsic beauty. And in order to do that, of course, we must have the most excellent cutter, the one who knows quite well the nature of the diamond. And that, of course, would be the Buddha, or one who has achieved supreme enlightenment in order to reveal the enlightened state to the practitioner. You wouldn't go to, in the same way that you wouldn't go to a car mechanic with a wrench, you know, to bust your rock, hoping that you're going to get a full diamond out of that. Neither would you go to a person who has not themselves achieved full realization and learn through them a path that does not arise from the enlightened mind. And so for that reason, we consider it, as Buddhists, we consider it important then to go to the Buddha and study the Buddha's teachings, because we consider that this is most assuredly to us arisen from the mind of enlightenment. When we first begin to study, what actually happens is we learn through information, through contemplation, through a process something like distillation, or what is it called when one logically removes points away because they don't count? Pardon? Deduction. Yes, that's the word I'm looking for. Through the process of deduction and through analyzing that too, one learns something about emptiness. For instance, one can learn this fairly easily. One can learn to look at the human hand. We have one all available, all of us do, that I can tell. And we can look at a human hand, and we can know that we call this hand. And then we can ask ourselves, through this process of deduction, what exactly is hand? Well, let's see now. Which part is the hand? Is it the part in the center? Or is it the part over here? Or is it this one, this one, this one, this one, or this one? Which part is the hand? Well, then you come to understand that this word hand is actually a composite of different parts. And then you might look at the different parts. You might look at palm, and you might look at heel, and you might look at thumb, and you might look at fingers, and you might look at nails, and you might look at cuticles. You might look at knuckles. You might look at all of these different things. And you might come to understand that each one of these things is actually a label that is that one can take down to its finest denominator. And through that process, one will understand that really there is no such solid thing as hand. Because if one were to try to find the hand, if one used that process of deduction, one would not actually find it. One would find a bunch of composite parts. And if one were to go down to any one of those parts, one would certainly not find that part, because one would find within that a bunch of composite parts, until one took something down to the molecular level, and even then would find that the nature of that molecule is not understood, and that the essence of this phenomena actually is emptiness. One could really study in this very analytical way, and one could find out that the idea of emptiness is a very sound and logical idea. But that would not mean necessarily that one had the experience of emptiness. Likewise, one might learn something of this word luminosity. One might try to find out if it is something like the light that we are used to. Is it the light that comes from the sun, or is it the light that comes from a lamp? Is it something like that, which we can see and which we can appreciate the absence of? And therefore, to us, that kind of luminosity or light becomes a thing. Well, if we were to analyze what the Buddha speaks of as luminosity, we would actually have a different experience entirely, in that the luminosity that the Buddha speaks of actually is not a measurable thing. It is not a specific thing like what you see when you turn on a light bulb, but rather is what the Buddha calls innate wakefulness, or what the Buddha calls non-specific awareness. Something that is dynamic but not measurable. Something that is, as they say in Buddhist practice, real but insubstantial. Insubstantial from the point of view of relativity, and that one cannot weigh it or measure it. This luminosity, through this process of receiving teaching and actually analyzing the teaching and beginning to internalize the teaching, can be understood basically in an intellectual way. And then we can begin to try to merge or mate this emptiness and luminosity. And at that point, what we would actually be engaging in is we would be taking concepts or ideas, and we would be trying to exaggerate them or develop them or experience them in some way that actually is not the true experience of emptiness and luminosity, simply because we would be relating not to an experience, but rather to concepts, which are things. And that isn't the true experience at all. So what is the point? Why do we study in this way? Well, we study in this way because these are the beginning steps. These are the things that we must do in order to move toward the experience of true nature. But actually, according to the Buddha, this direct experience will not happen until one removes the obstacles, the obscurations, and the defilements from one's mind stream in order to have a direct experience. The difficulty is that most practitioners, and these are young practitioners, perhaps not in terms of time that they have actually practiced, but in terms of maturity, in terms of ripening. Young practitioners putting together these ideas and pasting together this idea of emptiness and this idea of luminosity, having heard all this, will think that they have had some experience of true nature, and will not understand that they are at the stage that precedes that direct experience, a valid stage and a necessary stage. But it simply is not the same thing. One should be very careful not to mistake that. Very careful. Should one mistake that, one absolutely will throw the proverbial monkey wrench into one's practice. One will absolutely make a big mistake. In that when we cling to idea structure like that, it is literally impossible to have a direct experience of the primordial wisdom state. And the thing is that that idea process can be so subtle, and the thingness of each concept can be so ephemeral, in that we sometimes we think that we can see that we're structuring an idea, and other times, like mist, it seems to vanish, and we don't understand that we have constructed an idea. That process can be so gossamer thin, at least according to our perceptions, that we may really dupe ourselves into feeling that we have had this experience. And this clinging, even at that subtle a level, to the idea of emptiness, as opposed to the direct revelation of emptiness itself. The idea of the situation of clinging to the idea of emptiness and luminosity, or emptiness and compassion, or emptiness and bliss as being inseparable and non-dual. The clinging to that idea structure can absolutely preclude the ability to have a direct experience of that kind. So our job actually becomes, if we wish to practice efficiently and well, not to sit back and try to judge whether or not we have had a direct experience of nature. In fact, I have had many situations in which students will come to me and they'll say, well, I heard your talk on this nature of mind stuff, and now I'd really like to practice with you because I've already had this experience. Now, when that kind of thing happens to me, my first response is to think, we've got a long way to go. Or sometimes I actually do not accept the student because the student, in my opinion, has become so rigid that it would take more work than would probably happen before that person's tendency to discipline ran out, in order to undermine that rigidity. That there would be a great obstacle there, and that it might not work out. And so to a student like that, I'll generally say, just say some 7-line prayer and you'll be fine. What I really appreciate is when a student can come and say, I hear the idea and it rings true. It seems to somehow fall into me in a sense that I feel accepting of that, and I would like to try to practice that. And that kind of response I feel most excellent about. When a student comes to me with that kind of honest idea, saying, I've clearly never had that experience, but I can hear the truth in it, then I know from that that the student has a karmic connection with the practice that moves one toward enlightenment, because they can hear the truth in it, but they're also stable enough and relaxed enough and really humble enough to simply be okay with the fact that they're not enlightened yet. We are taught that until we actually enter into the Bhumi levels, and until the obstacles, the defilements to pure perception are actually removed, there is simply no way that nature can be seen. In the same way that one can look at a diamond in the rough, one can hold it up, and one can say, I visualize that this will be a diamond someday. I can imagine what that's going to be like. I know that this is going to be true. And so I'm going to consider that this is precious now, even while it looks a heck of a lot like a little brown pebble. But I'm going to know that this is precious, and I'm going to hold on to that. The student that can do that and carry the pebble around until the time that it can actually be cut, and take it to the right teacher and do that kind of thing, is the student that has in their hand a fortune, really a precious jewel, and will most assuredly have that jewel in such a way that it is fully and absolutely revealed. But the student who holds the little pebble in their hand and contrives the experience of that pebble's eventuality so strongly that they become more in love with their own visualization and their own knowing of the preciousness of the pebble and their own picture of what that pebble's going to look like, that they never bother to go through the discipline, and they never bother to actually hook into the cutter, and they may even discard the pebble, thinking that the visualization is more important. These are the people that don't have the wealth. They may never see the face of that diamond, or at least not for a long time, and maybe not that particular diamond. They may, in the same way that if an ordinary person were to take that pebble that really is a diamond and throw it away, you might say, gee, that person just threw away thousands and thousands of dollars. That person threw away a fortune. In the same way, that kind of practitioner, the latter practitioner that I've just described, might very easily simply cast aside the precious human rebirth and not make use of it. And this is the human rebirth in which one can meet the cutter. This is the human rebirth in which it is possible to remove the diamond from the ground. And all of you who are here are experiencing that. Somehow you have the magnificent karma to be exposed to a path that can lead to realization. Somehow you have the karma to be exposed to a situation in which your mental process is such that you can practice. And so that is the most auspicious of conditions. And while it's not to say that there won't be obstacles, even from children we have obstacles. Even the children that are here, some of them are very strong in their ability to be sharp and really think things through. And some of them are much more cloudy and need someone to keep on them and really help them through that. In the same way that we have our own particular needs and our own particular struggles that we have to go through. But we cannot deny that we all seem to have the karma for a precious human rebirth and the opportunity to practice. Our job then is not to make the mistake of being unable to distinguish between our own concepts and our own fabricated experiences, which actually, in truth, even though they seem to take more mental energy, are born of a mind that is lazy, satisfied only to be exposed to or to experience some kind of simple fabrication that is very impermanent and quite groundless. And like a house built on sand, very weak. That we can, be satisfied to have such an experience as that, as opposed to actually applying ourselves and really looking toward what it takes to remove the defilements and obstacles so that we can enter into the levels of realization where one has the direct revelation of nature. And then we have the added difficulty that comes when we perceive the great work, the great difficulty that is involved in actually looking at ourselves to determine for certain what those obstacles are. In the sense that it's much easier to adapt a very passive mode and think for ourselves, well, okay, I'll just sit back and I'll hear these teachings and I'll accumulate these teachings and I'll gather them together like shoes, and then I'll have 78 pairs of shoes. And in a very materialistic way, I'll just gather these teachings together and just kind of sit here, and then and basically what you'll do at that point is you'll conceptualize a lot and be satisfied with that. That's a very different process from really studying what the Buddha has taught about cause and effect, and really realizing that if there are defilements within the mind stream, one must certainly have accumulated the karma of them sometime, because they don't drop out of the blue. If one has the inability to perceive the true nature, one also has the karma and cause and effect relationship that has caused that. It never comes from an outside source. There is always cause and effect at work. All causes and effects arise interdependently and do so without ceasing until one realizes the primordial wisdom state. And if these causes and effects are arising, then we know we must apply the antidote. And we must apply it courageously, because it's not always easy to see that we need the antidote. That's not something that's easy to look at. If we find that it is difficult for us to experience compassion, if we find that it is difficult for us to have clarity in our practice, if we find that we have some pridefulness, if we find that we have ego clinging, and all of us must certainly find that if we look at ourselves honestly, because we are sentient beings, then we must know that we ourselves have, in some past time that possibly, most certainly, we have no memory of, have created those causes. And having created those causes, we must now learn to apply the antidote. And we shouldn't fall into the trap of thinking that we can contrive a cure, or that we can visualize a cure, or that we can make up a cure, or that we can play with the idea of a cure, or that we can consider that there is an idea that is a cure. But instead, we must actually apply the medicine, which never seems to work unless it's taken. There's no time that a medicine has cured a disease if it was not ingested. Simply looking at the medicine never quite does it, or knowing that it exists in the world never quite does it. One really has to take it, and Dharma is like that. So, at any rate, I hope that this information has been useful to you. I like to tell people that I feel that if you apply the information, if you take it home and really contemplate it, if you really think about it, and then continue with meditation and practice in such a way that you have some direct experience of it, and eventually achieve some realization, then the teaching has been useful. But if you don't do that, then unfortunately it has not been useful, and I would really rather prefer that it were useful to both of us. So I really appreciate your coming, and I hope that you will apply the teaching and use it very well. And please, I would like to make one more point. Don't think from what I've said that one should not analyze and contemplate about these states of realization, or that one should not absorb or take in ideas about emptiness and luminosity, or emptiness and compassion, or emptiness and bliss. One must, in the beginning, have these analytical ideas. One must hear the teachings. But one should not make the mistake of stopping there and thinking that that's it. One has to apply the antidote, because the only way that one can have the direct revelation of nature is to apply the antidote sufficiently that one's perception is purified and correct view is actually achieved. That really is the only method. That is the only way. And those are actually the only conditions under which this direct revelation is experienced. So please do begin with those steps, but please continue. Please apply the antidotes. And in the Buddhist teaching, there are many antidotes to remove defilements from the mind stream. So again, thank you very much for coming, and I hope that you enjoyed the teaching and that you will return again and again. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining with us. I know that was a somewhat short teaching, as these are often closer to an hour, but potent enough probably to take your mind for the rest of the hour. At least it's going to take mine, I think. So we're always glad to have you join with us. And we do show these on Wednesday evenings at 7:30, on Sunday, as well as Sundays at 11 a.m. on YouTube, where you are right now. They're also archived on YouTube, so you can find them later. And we're working on making that easier to find, but it's a process. YouTube doesn't apparently want that. In any case, what I want to say is that this coming Sunday will not be a teaching of Jetsumas, but we expect it to be a teachings of Khenpo Norgay. And it will also be on YouTube, so you'll find it in the same place, the same way you look. And we don't know what the topic will be, but Khenpo Norgay will be here for a couple of days into Lababduchen, which is Tuesday, one of the 4 big holidays in our tradition. And and on that day, he will be consecrating a tanka that one of our nuns had commissioned for and of Jetsunma. And so that's pretty exciting. And one of the painters that has worked with us, both in Sedona and here, Lama Girme Rabje, is a fabulous painter. He's painted all around the world and taught classes as well. He did the painting, and I can't wait to see it. So he probably can't either. So on Tuesday, on Lababduchen, he will be consecrating that tanka and doing all the ritual things to make it as potent as it has the potential to be. And then I believe, then we will have a schedule on Lababduchen that we don't know quite yet. So we'll let you know on Sunday. I'll put it in the chat. So let's see where the rest of our schedule is. You probably all know these by now. Meditation on YouTube, Saturdays and Sundays at 10 a.m. This is for the people that haven't been here. Beginning Buddha series, which is on, which is on hiatus right now, and we'll be back soon. We don't know when that'll be, or if it'll be the same time that it used to be, but soon. But Medicine Buddha is also on Facebook, and that is condensed teaching on every night at 7 p.m. And everyone is welcome to join there and put in their prayers and join in the practice. Again, it's all on the screen, and you'll be able to find your way. It's very short and in English, most of it anyway. We have a daily soak offering, which is a ceremony where we offer food, and it generates quite a bit of merit, and we dedicate that merit to just all kinds of auspicious outcomes. And that includes all the prayers that we get through the internet and through, you can make them on Torah.org. You can, there's just a variety of ways that you can get them to us. If you're here in person, you can write them down, and we'll read them out in these practices. So it is also a way of you getting more prayers for things, people, and situations that you have a particular connection to. As I said, you can go to tara.org and put all of that in. There's a place you can put prayer requests on just about every page at the bottom, as well as up at the top, all kinds of places. Just have a good time looking for them. The silk offering is Monday through Friday at 5:30. Tuesdays is, for the time being, at 4 instead of 5:30. Saturdays is at noon, and Sundays is at 2. You can find all that information, again, on tara.org, on the Maryland events calendar. The link is there in the chat, or you can just go on tara.org and look on the top menu to meditate, pray, study, and under that you'll find the calendar. And you can click on the event, and once you do that, it will show you where it is on what internet venue, and how you get there, and also if you need a practice, what the link to that practice is, so that you can join in with us. So we invite you to join us all the time. The temple is open outside every day, dawn to dusk, rain or shine, and you're welcome to come and walk around the stupas and meditate and pray and do all that you enjoy doing there. We are not quite yet open inside, but we hope to be soon. And it's really all we can say, because we really do hope to be soon. So we hope that you can join us here. If you want to make an offering to Jetsunma, having received her teachings, if you find them useful and you want to make a stronger connection, you can do that at her PayPal account. This is her personal account, jetsumagift@gmail.com, and that is also in the chat. Any other offerings you'd like to make to KPC, you can do so on the website, tara.org, and I'm sure you'll find a place. So join us anytime and always. We love having you here. We're so happy to share the Dharma with you, and we hope to do it as often as we can. Thanks again. Take care of yourselves, and hopefully we'll see you Sunday.